Hi guys, today I have another very cool piece to show. Um, it is the Marcin Swysz. Yes, I believe that's the correct pronunciation. Marcin Swysz, Lena. Um, and yeah, let's talk about it. I might go a little bit all over the place, but I think we can start a little bit about the maker. Marcin is a maker from Poland, and he's been making knives for, I believe, between like 15 or 20 years. And he started by grinding blades. Um, and I guess, like many makers, he was grinding or doing regrinds on production knives. And from then on, because, and I love makers who start like that because everyone who does regrinds will want, will have really amazing grinds. First of all, because they do regrinds, and second, the knife is sharp as heck. There are a few makers out there like Marcin, Rotten Design, who start off by doing regrinds and then now they make their own knives. That's kind of cool. And Marcin has had, plenty of design actually. I think he might be a little bit more well known in the production world as well because he has quite a few designs for Spyderco. Um, and, even the famous YouTuber Nick Shabazz, one of his favorites is the Swish Buoy, which again is a design from Marcin. Earlier on in Marcin's career, he was focusing on users, making the best users possible. Sometimes the size is a little bit larger, which is quite a change from the recent, trend that I see his knives that come out of his shop, which is much smaller and very dressy, or comparative, or comparing with what he did in the past. He used to make users only, perfecting the grind, perfecting the functionality, the action, um, and then now perfecting the art. And this knife, I think, illustrates really well, what functional art is. It's the perfect cross between something that is very mechanically sound, very functional, and the artistry. So let's get a little bit more into that, starting with the blade. I believe he uses RWL 34 for this one, which is, a very, very good steel. It takes an amazing finish. And check out that hand rub. Oh, yeah. Perfectly straight. It's quite vibrant, so it's one of the more vibrant hand rubs out there. When I first saw it in person, like usually when I collect, custom knives, many makers, Lee Williams, even Rexford, they have a lower vibrancy hand rub, but something like this one, the Marcin, the hand rub is super vibrant, especially out in sunlight. This thing shines. It has like a different shine to it, and I like this one the best actually. This is my favorite type of or finish on the hand rub. It's just so beautiful, and yeah, the grind is amazing. Check out how crisp the lines are. Just amazing. Look at a plunge grind. Look at how perfect that is. Superb. And while we're on this view, check out how tight the tolerance is between the blade and the two sides of the handle. Super tight. Love that. And next, let's have a look at the design itself on the frame. Look at all these milling lines. I think these types of touches are actually quite difficult to design, and it's something that a lot of makers are missing. Or newer makers will have a handle and put inlays on it, but to see the true mark of a great designer, you have something like this. A custom pivot that, it almost looks like a flower. Really beautiful. And then a frame that has, you know, very, very lovely mill patterns onto it. It's like a stepped milling. He does it on both sides, and you can notice that, like, you compare old Shurgorf knives to newer ones, or even customs, the difference that makes one look more, even though they both look simple, one looks much nicer for some reason. It's because of these small little touches in the design. You know, like, same thing as the pocket clip. Look at that. You know, these touches are what sets the knife apart, what makes it look more sophisticated. Um, and you know, it goes with what I mentioned about him working on his artistry. Just beautiful. And again, check out the finish on the pivot itself. At first, it's like, okay, it's a satin pivot, but I'm not sure if you can see, but there are the way that it reflects light. You see how it does that? I haven't seen many makers do that. I think it's just like when you machine it, this is what it will look like, but I've seen a similar looking pivot from Rexford and this one, and that's it. I haven't seen it on any other knives that I've owned, but this is just so beautiful to me. I don't know, there's just something about it. It's like everything comes to the middle point and it just reflects light like crazy. Really, really nice. I don't know if that was difficult or not to do it. It just happens to be that I don't really see it out there as often. And now let's talk about the main piece, the mother of pearl. There are 5 pieces of pearl. If you check, there's, you know, 1 on the top, there's 2 here, and then the 4th and the 5th. This one is just perfectly inlaid. I'm gonna try to zoom in if possible, but I don't know if you can see that it is really perfect. You know, it's just so seamless. It's incredible. No gaps at all. 0. Perfect piece of pearl and perfectly done inlays. And this is, you know, something like this makes me think that Marcin is at a level where many custom makers, even those who go to the best shows, they can't match his work. Because think about this. So when I posted my Marcin on Instagram, and my older one, which was the Draken, it has a similar type of inlay. I got a comment saying, "Oh wow, you know, did you start collecting art knives? Because, you know, the inlay is so intricate. It's so difficult to make that most custom tactical knife makers, they won't be able to do it. You can ask them to do it, to make it. It either A, takes way too long because it's so difficult to get it right, especially, you know, with a pattern like this. And B, they simply just don't know how to. You know, they don't have the tools or the know-how to be able to create something like this. And this, to me, you know, is what sets apart this knife from any other, or this maker from other makers. It's just so cool, and you can really see that when there was a initial moment at a point of time in knife collecting where production knives in the beginning, okay, there's like a real difference in action, because the production knives action would suck basically. You know, it won't lock up well, it has lock stick, it won't center, but custom knife makers are able to do it. And, you know, I think if you look at, there are quite a few makers who are custom makers who can get the action right, but they haven't made the jump to making something this intricate those are the ones that, for me, is a little bit more in trouble with the newer tiers of the production knives, like the ones coming out of China from Riyadh, from We, who can make astounding action. The action, or I guess, like mechanically it's sound. It's centered. It like it can flip really easily, but they cannot yet do something like this, which is what you cannot buy in a production knife. You cannot find something like this. It's just too time consuming slash too difficult to do this on a mass scale. And makers who haven't made the jump to doing something that is more complex like this, I think, are going to have an increasingly harder time setting themselves apart from the competition. Which is why I think Marcin today is one of the best tactical knife makers out there, because he's got the functionality and the art. Speaking of functionality, the blade, again, because he started off as someone who does regrinds, it's extremely sharp. It's a hollow grind. It is so sharp. It's incredible. The edge is super bitey and it slices really well. Even the lock bar, it's quite thick actually. The frames, it's not too thick. It's stout, so it's really strong. I already mentioned the tolerances between the two sides of the pivot. Zero movement. It's like rock solid. He even has a lock bar insert, which you don't see too many custom knife makers at this tier use. Um, but I really appreciate, to be honest. Like Shirogorov uses it, Marcin uses it. But a lot of other makers, they just carbonize the lock face, and usually that should give basically the same strength between um, the steel lock bar insert and the carbonized titanium frame. But it's just nicer when you have an insert, whether or not it's a steel or not steel insert. It just means that as it wears down, it's not too difficult to change the insert instead of having to replace the whole scale when you send it back to the maker. You can see this is where the insert has been screwed in. So yeah, functionality wise, I mean, it's there. It's super solid. The pocket clip works like a dream. It goes in and out of the pocket really very easily. And now that we're in this frame, you can see that he has a ton of milling cutouts inside, triangular shaped, which lightens up the knife quite a bit. It still feels, to be honest, quite not not heavy, but it's like the right weight. And it's not like super feathery, right? Light, but for the thickness of the frame, for the rigidity, this feels like one of the more, or even most rigid small knives that I've had so far, because it's just functions really well. Not to mention the really thick pivot. I don't know if it's this thick going all the way through. When I tried sliding paper in, but the paper would get stuck here, around here. So I don't know if that means the pivot is actually this thick all the way through or not. We'll have to check with Marcin on that. Likely not, because I don't think you'll be able to find bearings that can fit in. But still, quite a strong build overall. He also uses standoffs, so you're not, you don't have to worry about the construction as much. And yeah, check out the centering, perfect centering. The action has nice jimping and it fires out pretty easily. My previous Marcin, the Draken, had I think a more like free drop fall shot action, and it fires even harder. This one has a more balanced action, so it doesn't fire out as hard, but it's still quite reliable. Yeah. So it depends on your taste. When I first got it, I actually preferred the Draken quite a bit more because it fires hard. But with the small flipper tab, it actually, if you play with it a lot, you can start to feel it on your finger. It can start to hurt a little bit. But this one, it doesn't hurt, even if you play with it a lot, and it still fires reliably. And it's got one of those closing actions where there's no hiccup whatsoever. Zero hiccup. Super smooth. Not all knives have zero hiccup like that. So that's just really nice. I mean, he nailed the whole thing. So yeah, I hope this was a good enough coverage of the Lena from Marcin. I'm super glad that he's focusing on, you know, the smaller knives and jumping into making these types of dressy knives. I just feel like he's one of the more underrated makers today, simply because people don't know him. I think he doesn't really do knife shows. I don't think he goes to like blade shows or some other shows like that. And pardon the interruption. Um, I was gonna say, basically, you know, he's underappreciated. I think because he's, you know, doesn't do a lot of marketing himself. He doesn't really do many shows, but it reminds me of when I first got my Michael Raymond a few years ago. It was still in the 4 digits when in his auctions of his most complex build, because people didn't know his quality. And if you look at him today, you know, they go for over 5 digits, you know, over 10,000 US, and, you know, more recently, even over 20. So, you know, I just have that same feeling where the tolerance is super tight, it's very functional, and it's unique. It's got a nice design, ergonomics are great, you know, fits the hand very well, super sharp. I mean, it's got everything going for it. It's just people don't know him as much yet. So there you go. I really hope you enjoyed the video today. I really, really enjoyed this knife. Such a well-balanced knife in every aspect, you know. The action, the finishing, the fitment, the using, you know, usage, functionality of it. Just so good. So yeah, thank you for watching.